Queen stood before the great window of her throne room and watched the three suns of her world sink below the crystal mountains. She had ruled the empire for over 800 years, and in all that time, she had learned to keep her emotions hidden behind a mask of calm authority. But today, her hands trembled slightly as she clasped them behind her back. Her daughter was coming home. Princess had vanished 7 years ago during what should have been a simple diplomatic mission to the outer territories. The search parties had found nothing. The psychics had sensed nothing. After 3 years of silence, the council had declared her dead and had been forced to hold a ceremony of passing for a child she refused to believe was gone. Now, a ship bearing personal identification codes had entered space and was approaching the throne world. Had not slept since receiving the message. The door behind her slid open, and her chief advisor, a tall male named, entered with obvious reluctance. His silver skin seemed paler than usual, and his 4 eyes would not meet hers. "My queen," he said, "the princess's vessel will arrive within the hour. However, there is something you must know before she lands." Turned to face him, speak. Hesitated. In 8 centuries of service, he had never hesitated before. "Our sensors have detected multiple life signs aboard her ship. One of them is, the others are not. Refugees, perhaps, always had a soft heart for those in need." "No, my queen," finally looked at her, and she saw something in his eyes that she had never seen there before. Fear. "One of the life signs is human. The other 3 are something our sensors cannot identify. They appear to be a mixture of and human biology." The queen said nothing. She simply stared at as if he had spoken in a language she did not understand. "My queen, I recommend we intercept the vessel before it reaches the surface. We can contain this situation quietly and avoid any public scandal." "You recommend I arrest my own daughter?" "I recommend we investigate before allowing unknown elements into the heart of our empire. The humans are dangerous, my queen. You know this. We have avoided them for 3 centuries for good reason." Turned back to the window. The last of the 3 suns had disappeared, and the sky was shifting to the deep purple of twilight. Somewhere up there, her daughter was racing toward home after 7 years of silence, and she was bringing something with her that would shake the foundations of everything the believed. "Let her land," the queen said quietly. "Let her come to me. I will see my daughter." Bowed and left without another word. 1 hour later, stood at the center of her throne room surrounded by her personal guards. The great doors swung open, and Princess walked through them for the first time in 7 years. She looked different. Her silver skin had taken on a slightly warmer tone, and her once elaborate hair was now cut short in a practical style that no noble would ever wear. She moved differently too, with a relaxed confidence that seemed almost human in its casualness. But it was the man walking beside her that drew every eye in the room. He was human, tall and broad-shouldered with brown skin and dark hair cut close to his head. He wore simple clothes that had been patched and repaired many times, and his face carried the weathered look of someone who had worked hard all his life. He walked into the throne room of the most powerful empire in the galaxy as if he were walking into his own home, with no fear and no hesitation. He was holding the hand of a small girl who could not have been more than 6 years old. The child had silver-tinted skin like her mother but brown eyes like her father, and she looked around the throne room with open wonder. Behind them walked a boy of about 4 years, clutching the leg of his father's pants with one hand while sucking the thumb of his other hand. His hair was dark like the humans, but it had a metallic sheen that caught the light. And in the human's other arm, wrapped in a soft blanket, was a baby. The infant was sleeping peacefully against his chest, one tiny hand gripping his shirt. Queen felt her legs weaken beneath her. She gripped the arm of her throne to steady herself. "Mother," said, and her voice cracked slightly on the word, "I have come home." The queen could not speak. She could only stare at the scene before her, her daughter, a human male and 3 children who should not exist. This is Daniel, continued, gesturing to the man beside her. He is my life mate, and these are our children. Myra is our eldest. The little girl gave a shy wave. Is our son. The boy pressed his face against his father's leg. And this is Lily, our youngest. The baby stirred at the sound of her name, but did not wake. The throne room was utterly silent. The guards stood frozen. The advisors who had gathered to witness the princess's return seemed to have stopped breathing. Daniel Carter looked at the queen with steady eyes. He did not bow or kneel or show any of the formal submission that protocol demanded. He simply stood there, holding his children, waiting. Mother said, I know this is not what you expected. I know this breaks every law and tradition our people hold sacred, but I love him. I have built a life with him. These children are your, and they deserve to know their family. Queen finally found her voice. It came out as barely a whisper. Everyone leave now. The guards and advisors hurried out of the throne room, grateful to escape the tension that filled the air like electricity before a storm. When the great doors closed, leaving only the queen, her daughter, and the impossible family she had brought home, descended from her throne on unsteady legs. She stopped a few feet from and looked at her daughter with eyes that held 7 years of grief, confusion, and desperate hope. Explain, the queen said. Explain everything, and pray to our ancestors that your explanation is enough to save you from what the council will demand when they learn of this. Took a deep breath. Daniel reached over and squeezed her hand gently. It started with a broken ship and a human who refused to let me die, she said. And she began to tell her mother the story that would change their world forever. 7 years earlier, Princess had been young and foolish and eager to prove herself worthy of her mother's throne. When the council assigned her to lead a diplomatic mission to the outer territories, she had accepted without hesitation. It was supposed to be simple. Travel to 3 allied worlds, deliver formal greetings, return home with honors. Her ship malfunctioned on the 2nd day. The engine core cracked without warning, flooding the lower decks with radiation and killing half her crew instantly. The survivors managed to seal the contaminated sections and send out a distress signal before the backup systems began to fail one by one. Within hours, found herself alone in the command center, watching her air supply tick down toward zero while the cold vacuum of space pressed against the hull. She had accepted her death. She had composed a final message to her mother and prepared her mind for the journey to the ancestors. Then the human ship appeared on her sensors. It was a small freighter called the Dawn Runner, barely larger than a shuttle, held together with patches and prayers. The pilot identified himself as Daniel Carter and offered assistance. Refused immediately. She would rather die than accept help from a human. Daniel Carter ignored her refusal. She watched in disbelief as his tiny ship docked with her damaged vessel. She heard his footsteps in the corridor outside the command center. She raised her weapon when the door opened, and a human male stepped through with his hands held up in a gesture of peace. I know you said no, he told her calmly, but I am not going to fly away and leave someone to die alone in the dark, so you can shoot me if you want, or you can let me take a look at your engines. Kept her weapon raised. My people have warned us about your kind. You are violent and deceptive. You take what you want through force. Daniel smiled, and there was genuine warmth in it despite the gun pointed at his chest. Your people sound like they have met some bad humans. I am sorry for that, but I am just a guy with a toolbox and too much stubbornness to leave someone in trouble. So what do you say? Let me help. She did not lower her weapon for another hour. Daniel spent that hour sitting on the floor across from her, talking about nothing important. He told her about his ship, which he had rebuilt with his own hands from a salvage yard wreck. He told her about his favorite food, which was something called macaroni and cheese that his mother used to make. He told her about the stars he had visited and the strange things he had seen in his travels. He talked to her like she was a person, not a princess or an alien or an enemy. He talked to her like someone who simply wanted to pass the time until she decided to trust him. Eventually, she lowered the weapon. Daniel worked on her ship for 3 days straight. He barely slept. He crawled through maintenance tunnels that were too small for bodies and repaired systems that he had never seen before using nothing but determination and creativity. When he got hungry, he shared his food with her. When she got cold because the heating systems were damaged, he gave her his jacket. On the second night, while they waited for a crucial repair to finish, asked him why he had come. Why had he risked his life for a stranger who belonged to a species that hated his kind? Daniel thought about the question for a long moment. Then he told her about his family. He had grown up on a colony world called Meridian with his parents and 2 younger sisters. It was a farming community, peaceful and quiet, the kind of place where everyone knew their neighbors and nobody locked their doors. When Daniel was 19 years old, a corporation decided they wanted the land beneath his town for mining purposes. They poisoned the water supply to force the residents to leave. His parents and sisters died within a month. Daniel survived because he had been off-world at the time, learning to pilot cargo ships at a training academy. He came home to find graves where his family should have been. "That is when I learned something important," he told quietly. "Bad things happen because good people do nothing. My family died because nobody was willing to stand up and help them, so I made a promise to myself. I would never fly past someone in trouble. I would never ignore someone calling for help. It does not matter who they are or where they come from. Every life matters." Looked at this human with new eyes. She had been taught her whole life that humans were monsters, savages barely better than animals. But this man had traveled across the galaxy alone, helping strangers simply because it was the right thing to do. He had shown her more kindness in 2 days than most nobles showed in a lifetime. On the third day, Daniel finished the repairs. Her ship was functional again, and she could return home to her mother and her duties and her life of privilege and obligation. She did not want to go. "Come with me," she said to Daniel as he prepared to return to his own ship. "Leave this life behind. Come see the galaxy with me." Daniel stared at her. "You know I am human, right? Your people will not exactly welcome me with open arms." "I do not care what my people think. I care about you." She reached out and took his hand. It was warm and rough with calluses, so different from the smooth, cool skin of her own kind. "I have never met anyone like you, Daniel Carter. I do not want to lose you." Daniel looked at their joined hands for a long moment. Then he looked up at her face, and she saw something in his eyes that made her heart beat faster. "Your mother is going to hate me," he said. "Probably. Your whole civilization is going to hate me." "Almost certainly." Daniel laughed, and it was the most wonderful sound had ever heard. "Well, I have always been good at making people angry. I guess one more empire cannot hurt." He stepped forward and kissed her gently, and felt her entire world shift beneath her feet. They left together that night, 2 people from 2 different worlds setting out into the unknown. They had no idea what the future would bring. They only knew that they had found something rare and precious in the vast emptiness of space. They had found each other. Queen listened to her daughter's story in silence. They had moved from the throne room to her private chambers, and Daniel had taken the children to a guest suite so mother and daughter could speak alone. The queen sat in her favorite chair by the window while paced back and forth, the words pouring out of her like water from a broken dam. "After we left my ship, we traveled together for 6 months," continued. "Daniel showed me the human colonies, the trading posts, the frontier worlds where people of all species lived side by side. I saw things I never imagined existed, Mother. I saw humans building communities in the most hostile environments, helping strangers without expecting anything in return, laughing and crying and loving with an intensity that our people have forgotten how to feel." "Our people feel deeply," the Queen said quietly. "We simply express it differently." No, mother, we suppress it. We hide behind tradition and protocol and ancient laws because we are afraid of what might happen if we let ourselves feel. Stopped packing and faced her mother directly. I was afraid too at first. I kept waiting for Daniel to reveal his true nature, to prove that all the stories about humans were true. But he never did. He just kept being kind and patient and good. The Queen closed her eyes. Tell me about this colony, New Haven. Smiled, and there was a warmth in her expression that the Queen had never seen before. We found it by accident. Daniel's ship needed repairs, and New Haven was the closest settlement with a proper shipyard. We intended to stay for a week. We stayed for 7 years. She told her mother about the small house they had built at the edge of town, with a garden where Daniel grew vegetables, and a workshop where learned to repair machines alongside her husband. She told her about the neighbors who welcomed them without judgment, the community celebrations where humans and the occasional alien visitor danced together under the stars, the simple rhythms of a life built on hard work and mutual respect. When I became pregnant with Myra, I was terrified, admitted. Nobody knew if a human could have children together. The doctors had no answers, but Daniel held my hand and told me that we would figure it out together, no matter what happened. And we did. The children, the Queen said slowly, they are healthy. They are more than healthy. They are remarkable. Eyes lit up with maternal pride. Myra inherited my telepathic abilities, but she uses them in ways I never could. She can sense when someone is hurting, even from far away. She spends hours sitting with sick neighbors, just holding their hands and sending them feelings of peace. Has Daniel's curiosity and my analytical mind. He takes things apart and puts them back together in new configurations that make no sense until suddenly they work better than before. And Lily, even as a baby, she glows when she laughs. Actually glows, mother, with bioluminescence that pulses with her emotions. The Queen opened her eyes and looked at her daughter. You speak of these children as miracles. They are miracles. They should not exist according to everything science tells us, yet here they are, living proof that the boundaries between our species are not as fixed as we believed. A long silence stretched between them. Finally, the Queen asked the question that had been burning in her mind since arrival. Why did you come back? After all these years of hiding, why return now? His expression crumbled. She sat down heavily on a nearby couch and buried her face in her hands. When she spoke again, her voice was thick with grief. The swarm found New Haven. The Queen drew a sharp breath. They were a nightmare species, a hive mind that consumed entire worlds for resources. They had destroyed dozens of civilizations over thee and showed no capacity for negotiation or mercy. We had no warning, continued. One day we were living our quiet life, and the next day the sky was full of swarm ships. The colony had no defenses, no military, nothing but farmers and traders and families. She looked up at her mother with red-rimmed eyes. Daniel organized the evacuation. He gathered everyone he could find and led them to the emergency shelters while the swarm descended. When our house caught fire from the bombardment, he ran back inside to get the children. He carried all 3 of them through burning debris, mother. He suffered burns on his arms and back that still have not fully healed, but he never dropped them. He never stopped. The Queen felt something stir in her chest, an emotion she could not quite name. We escaped on one of the last ships to leave the surface. We watched New Haven burn from orbit, watched everything we had built disappear in flames. And when Daniel asked me where we should go, I could think of only one place. Here, the Queen whispered. Here, nodded. I know our people have laws against this. I know the Council will want to punish us, exile us, maybe even execute Daniel for the crime of loving me. But I had nowhere else to turn. You are my mother. These are I thought maybe, just maybe, that might matter more than ancient laws written by people who never imagined a world where humans and could be family. The Queen sat perfectly still for a long moment. Then she asked a question that surprised them both. When the swarm attacked and everything was burning and your children were in danger, what did Daniel do? Blinked, I told you. He ran into the fire to save them. Without hesitation. Without hesitation. Without thinking. He just moved like it was the most natural thing in the world. The queen nodded slowly. I have lived for over 800 years. I have known thousands of males, including your father and the many suitors who sought your hand before you disappeared. Tell me honestly, how many of them would have run into a burning building for their children? Opened her mouth to answer, then closed it again. She thought about the nobles she had grown up with, the carefully controlled emotions, the political calculations that guided every action. She thought about her own father, who had been kind but distant, who had loved her in his way but had never once made her feel like she was the most important thing in his universe. I do not know, she finally admitted. Maybe some of them, maybe. Maybe, the queen repeated. But this human, this Daniel Carter, he did not hesitate. He did not calculate the risks or consider the political implications. He simply acted because his children needed him. She rose from her chair and crossed the room to sit beside her daughter. For the first time in 7 years, she took his hand in her own. I have spent 3 centuries believing that humans were beneath us. It seems I have much to learn. 3 days passed, and Queen found herself doing something she had not done in centuries. She was hiding. The royal garden stretched for miles behind the palace, filled with crystal flowers and singing trees and pools of water so clear you could see to the bottom of worlds. It was a place of peace and beauty, designed to soothe the minds of rulers burdened by the weight of empire. The queen had not visited the gardens in decades, preferring the solitude of her chambers to the openness of nature. But now she stood behind a pillar of white stone, watching 3 children play among the crystal flowers, and she could not bring herself to look away. Myra, the eldest, had discovered a small creature living beneath one of the singing trees. It was a garden sprite, a tiny being made of light and sound that the palace groundskeepers cultivated for their beauty. Most children ignored the sprites or chased them for sport. Myra sat perfectly still beside the creature, her eyes closed in concentration, and the queen realized with a start that the child was communicating with it telepathically. No child should be able to use telepathy at such a young age. The mental abilities typically develop during adolescence, after years of training and discipline. But Myra wielded her gift as naturally as breathing, and the garden sprite danced around her head in obvious delight at finding someone who could understand its simple thoughts. Nearby had gathered a collection of stones and crystal shards and was arranging them in complex patterns on the ground. The queen watched him work, his small face scrunched in concentration, his hands moving with surprising precision for a 4-year-old. He would place a stone, consider it, move it slightly, then add another. The pattern made no sense that the queen could see, just random shapes and lines. Then pressed his hand to the center of his creation, and the whole thing lit up. The stones and crystals began to glow with inner light, pulsing in rhythm like a heartbeat. The energy flowed through the patterns had created, amplifying and reflecting until the entire arrangement shone like a small star. The queen gasped involuntarily. What had done should have been impossible. He had created a basic power matrix using nothing but garden debris, something that engineers spent years learning to design. The child had done it instinctively, playing a game that he probably did not even understand. A soft cooing sound drew the queen's attention to a blanket spread beneath one of the crystal trees. Baby Lily lay there, watched over by a nervous palace servant who clearly had no idea what to make of her hybrid charge. The infant was awake and happy, waving her tiny fists at the branches above her head. As the queen watched, Lily laughed at something only she could see, and when she laughed, her skin began to glow. It started as a faint shimmer, like moonlight on water. Then it grew brighter, the bioluminescence spreading across her arms and face in swirling patterns that pulsed with her joy. The servant stumbled backward in alarm, but Lily just kept laughing, delighted by her own light show. The queen found herself smiling. She could not remember the last time she had smiled. "They are something else, are they not?" The voice came from behind her, and the queen turned to find Daniel Carter standing a respectful distance away. He had approached so quietly that she had not heard him, which was impressive given that hearing was far superior to human. "I did not mean to intrude," Daniel said. "I was just looking for the kids, is resting, and I wanted to make sure they were not causing trouble." The queen studied him for a long moment. In the daylight of the gardens, she could see the burned scars on his arms that had mentioned. They were still raw and painful looking, a testament to what he had endured to save his children. "Your daughter speaks to garden sprites," the queen said finally. "Your son builds power matrices from stones. Your baby glows when she laughs. These are not normal children." "No," Daniel agreed with a slight smile. "They are not, but then nothing about our family is normal." "Why did you come here? You must have known my people would not welcome you." Daniel walked forward until he stood beside her, both of them watching the children play. "I came because needed to come home. She missed you, even though she would never admit it. She missed her world and her people and her mother. She gave up everything to be with me, and the least I could do was bring her back when she needed it most." "And what do you want from me, human? What do you expect to gain from this situation?" Daniel turned to look at her directly. His brown eyes were calm and honest, without any trace of the deception or aggression that propaganda attributed to his species. "I do not want anything for myself, Your Majesty. I know I am nothing special. I am just a cargo pilot who got lucky enough to meet the most amazing woman in the galaxy. But my children deserve to know their grandmother. They deserve to understand where they come from, both sides of their heritage. That is all I want. That is all I have ever wanted." The queen felt something shift in her chest. For 3 centuries, she had believed that humans were incapable of selflessness, that they thought only of their own gain. But this man had crossed the galaxy, faced certain rejection and possible death, simply so his children could know their family. "You are not what I expected," she admitted quietly. "Neither are you," Daniel replied. "Told me stories about you. She said you were cold and distant and cared more about the Empire than your own daughter, but I have seen the way you look at those kids. You have been watching them for an hour and you think I did not notice, but I did. You love them already. You are just afraid to admit it." The queen said nothing. She could not deny what he had seen. A small voice interrupted their conversation. "Daddy." They both turned to find Myra standing a few feet away, her silver-brown eyes wide with curiosity. The garden sprite had followed her, and now perched on her shoulder like a tiny glowing pet. "Hey, sweetheart," Daniel said, kneeling down to her level. "What is up?" Myra looked at the queen with an expression of innocent wonder. "Is this Grandma? Mommy said Grandma lives in a big palace with pretty gardens." Daniel glanced at the queen, uncertain how she would react. But before he could say anything, Queen stepped forward and knelt down as well, bringing herself to eye level with her granddaughter. "Yes, little one," she said softly, "I am your grandmother." Myra smiled, and it was like watching the sun rise. "I knew it. I could feel it in my head. You feel like Mommy, but older and sadder." She reached out and took the queen's hand without hesitation. "Do not be sad, Grandma. We are here now. Everything will be okay." The queen felt tears gathering in her eyes for the first time in centuries. This child, this impossible miracle of 2 worlds, had seen straight through all her defenses and found the lonely old woman hiding underneath. "I believe you are right," the queen whispered. "I believe everything will be okay." That night, Queen held baby Lily for the first time. The infant grabbed her finger with a tiny fist and would not let go, and when she laughed, her bioluminescence painted the queen's ancient face in colors of pure joy. For the first time in 800 years, the queen felt hope. The High Council chamber had stood at the heart of the empire for over 10,000 years. Its walls were carved from living crystal that sang in harmony with the voices of those who spoke within it. 12 seats formed a semicircle around the central floor, each occupied by a who had served the empire for centuries. They were the oldest and most powerful alive, and they looked down at the queen with expressions ranging from concern to outright hostility. "The law is clear," declared, his ancient voice echoing through the chamber. "Bonding is forbidden. The children of such unions are classified as abominations. The human must be executed, and the offspring exiled to the outer territories where they can cause no harm to our civilization." Queen stood at the center of the chamber, facing the council alone. Protocol demanded that she take her seat among them for this hearing, but she had chosen to stand where the accused typically stood. It was a message, and they understood it perfectly. "The law you cite is 3,000 years old," the queen replied calmly. "It was written during a time when our people believed that species mixing would weaken our bloodlines and corrupt our culture. Those fears have proven baseless across 100 generations of interaction with other civilizations." "But never with humans," interjected. She was the eldest of them all, nearly 2,000 years old, and her voice carried the weight of ages. "The humans are different. They are violent, unpredictable, and dangerous. They multiply like vermin and consume everything in their path. Allowing one into the royal bloodline would be an invitation to disaster." "I have met this human," the queen said. "I have watched him with his children. I have spoken with him at length. He is none of the things our propaganda claims humans to be." "One human does not represent all humans," argued. "Even if this Daniel Carter is everything you say, accepting him sets a precedent. Other will take human mates. Our pure bloodlines will be diluted. Within a few generations, we will be unrecognizable." "Perhaps that would not be the worst thing." The council chamber fell silent. The crystalline walls stopped singing, as if even the building itself was shocked by the queen's words. "I have ruled this empire for over 800 years," continued, her voice growing stronger. "I have watched us become increasingly isolated, increasingly rigid, increasingly afraid of anything that challenges our traditions. We look down on other species from our crystal towers and congratulate ourselves on our superiority, while the galaxy moves on without us." She began to pace, something no one had ever seen her do in a formal setting. "3 days ago, I watched my granddaughter communicate telepathically with a garden sprite. She is 6 years old and has received no formal training, yet she wields abilities that take our children decades to develop. My grandson built a working power matrix from garden stones. He is 4. My infant granddaughter produces bioluminescence that responds to her emotions in ways our scientists have never documented." She stopped and faced the council directly. "These children are not abominations. They are possibilities. They represent what we could become if we had the courage to grow beyond our limitations." Leaned forward, his 4 eyes narrowing. "You speak of these children as if they are gifts, but what happens when they grow up? What happens when this human influence spreads through our society? The humans nearly destroyed their own world before they reached the stars. Their history is written in blood and fire. Is that what you want for our people?" "Human history is also written in love and sacrifice and incredible resilience," the queen replied. "I have learned more about humans in the past 3 days than I learned in 3 centuries of receiving reports from our intelligence services. They are flawed, yes. They make mistakes. They fight among themselves. But they also protect their families with a ferocity that puts our measured responses to shame. They love without reservation. They hope even when hope seems foolish." She walked to the center of the chamber and looked up at each in turn. "When the swarm attacked New Haven, do you know what Daniel Carter did? He did not calculate the odds or consult with authorities or wait for permission. He simply ran into a burning building to save his children. He suffered burns that would have killed most because he refused to stop until his family was safe." Her voice softened. Can any of you honestly tell me that a male would have done the same? Can any of you look me in the eyes and say that our people value love and family above protocol and self-preservation? None of them spoke. I did not think so. Queen drew herself up to her full height. I am invoking the royal prerogative, a power that has not been used in over 1,000 years. By my authority as sovereign of the empire, I declare Daniel Carter to be a member of the royal family, with all rights and protections that entails. His children with Princess are recognized as legitimate heirs to the throne. Any action against them will be considered an act of treason against the crown. The council chamber erupted in chaos. Shouted over each other, crystal walls screamed in discordant harmonies, and ancient laws were cited like weapons. But the queen simply stood in the center of it all, waiting for the storm to pass. When the noise finally died down, spoke again. Her voice was quiet but carried clearly through the chamber. You are making a mistake, my queen. This decision will change everything. Yes, Queen agreed. It will, and perhaps that is exactly what our empire needs. She turned and walked toward the chamber doors. Before she left, she paused and looked back at the council one final time. Our isolation from humanity ends today. If one human could change my heart, perhaps humanity can change the galaxy. I intend to find out. The doors swung open, and the queen stepped out into the corridor where her family waited. Stood with tears streaming down her face. Daniel had one arm around her shoulders and baby Lily in the other. Myra and sat on a nearby bench, looking confused by all the adult emotions swirling around them. Queen walked straight to Daniel. He started to bow, as he had tried to do several times over the past few days, but she stopped him with a hand on his shoulder. You are family now, she said. Family does not bow. Then she did something that shocked everyone watching, including herself. She pulled Daniel into an embrace, careful not to crush the baby between them. Thank you, she whispered so only he could hear. Thank you for loving my daughter. Thank you for bringing her home. Thank you for showing me that I was wrong about your people. Daniel hugged her back gently. Thank you for giving us a chance. Joined the embrace, wrapping her arms around both of them. Myra and ran over and pressed themselves against whatever legs they could reach. Baby Lily, sensing the emotion around her, began to glow softly in her father's arms. In the crystal corridors of the most ancient palace in the galaxy, a family held each other close. They were human and young and old, a mixture of two worlds that should never have come together but somehow had. The queen led them all to the gardens where she had first watched her play. The three suns were setting again, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. Crystal flowers caught the fading light and scattered it into rainbows. Myra chased her brother through the singing trees. Lily laughed and glowed in her grandmother's arms. Daniel and stood together, hands intertwined, watching their family with wonder in their eyes. I never imagined this, said softly. I never dared to hope. That is the thing about hope, Daniel replied, pulling her close. It has a way of surprising you. Queen looked at the human who had become her son, the daughter who had found her way home, and the three impossible children who carried the future of two worlds in their small bodies. For the first time in 800 years, she felt like she understood what truly mattered. Not tradition, not protocol, not ancient laws written by people who had never known what it meant to love without boundaries. Just family, just hope, just the courage to change. The crystal gardens echoed with laughter. Human and voices mingled together in the fading light of three setting suns. And somewhere in the distance, the singing trees learned a new song. It was the sound of a new dawn beginning.